So a lot of the customers are asking mainly about gas blowback rifles. Like, Mike, what's a realistic rifle that you would recommend? What are some actual gas blowback rifles you recommend for also for training purposes and that realism? Well, a lot of customers would say VFC, GHK. But if you really want a gas efficient rifle, I would recommend a Marui MWS. Let's get into it. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another episode on Airsoft Master. And today, like you guys have been requesting, and a lot more customers were asking about us in store is, what's a good rifle that we would recommend that's more realistic in situations wise and would be good for for training? Well, here's our recommendation. The Marui MWS itself. Now, I have two models in front of me that you'll see is the M4A1 and as well to that the Mark 18 Mod 1. Now, there basically has some common things that you'll see is there's the full metal barrel system and a 14mm counterclockwise threading. The difference between it on the barrel itself is you're going to have is the 14.5 length in the front and a 10.3 on the actual Mark 18 Mod 1. As well to that, what's also common that they have is the fact that these are all Picatinny rail systems, the real estate to put any optics, flashlights, laser systems, and as well to that, heck, even if you want to put a grenade launcher, by all means. Now, the difference is where we actually get into it now is the fact that the rail system on it is, for example, on the M4A1 is using a standard 7-inch quad rail system, while you end up with the Daniel Defense rail on mainly the Mark 18 Mod 1, which is about a 9.5, 9.5. Now, what I do like about this is the fact that these guys are really rugged on themselves and more realistic than ever. While one thing I will give a comment to for Marui themselves is they actually got the color right for the rail. Every single AEG rail or any other gas blowback types I've seen at aftermarket companies, the color would be a little bit too bright, too dark. It's just not really there. While the Mark 18 MWS system, it's pretty dead on close to it. Now that we talked about the rail system and also the barrels itself, let's go ahead and talk about the receivers. The difference between the M4A1 to the Mark 18 is the Mark 18 is going to be more monolithic because of the fact that it uses a free flow barrel system on the actual rail itself. Now, the reason why you're not going to be able to have that on this one is because of the fact that the Delta ring is what's holding the actual quad rail in front of the M4. But now let's get to the common sense of these guys is the fact that you'll end up with is the Colt license trademarks on both these rifles with the 5.56 actual caliber on there, and as well to that your own serial number that's on the rifle engraved into it. Nice little touches to keep it more of that realistic style of like for the Milsim guys out there that want to keep it to the teeth of being that pure kosher type of build. Now for your actual standard AR controls, again you're going to be able to use safe, semi, and full auto on the left hand side of the lower receiver. Now the one thing I will have to recommend in situations that you have noticed is advised is the fact that once you actually pull the trigger itself, you're not going to be able to engage back to safe. Reason why is because the hammer has already been released. So to put it back on safe, go ahead and rack it, and then put it on safe and you'll be good to go. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the grips on these rifles itself. It's just your standard M4A1 style grip where basically texturized and the finger manipulation on the actual part lower in the front of the grip. Now, if you do want to change these grips, I do highly advise that the fact that you keep the original screw from your MWS. Due to the fact that a lot of people who were to try to use the actual real steel grip on there, they would actually use the actual screw that comes with it. The issue is though is if you do use that, you're going to end up messing up your actual trigger box inside. So I would recommend is keeping the stock screw on these guys. Now that we talked about the receiver, also the grip and selector wise, let's go ahead and talk about trigger pull. Now, comparison to the MWS to other like such as the GHK, the VFCs, and also maybe even the WeTech actual gas blowback rifles, the one little drawback I have with the MWS is you do have a quite mushy trigger pull on this thing. Kind of difficult to actually find that wall as well on the actual gas blowback rifle itself. For example, pulling. Can't find that wall. There we go. But let's go ahead and find that reset. So the reset is still pretty nice with the audible click all the way through. But again, it was a very creeper type onto finding the wall when you actually pull the trigger itself. But the good news is this can be fixed by just basically upgrading the actual trigger box itself, such as the guns modifier or even the GNP trigger box itself. Now that we already talked about the trigger box, and speaking about it, let's go ahead and actually go more in depth about upgrade compatibility, parts, and even possible chances of how to repair it. Now, basically just how to break it down as normal as an AR or even other gas blowback, you're going to go ahead and push out the rear body pin itself. Once you pull that out, you'll be able to break the rifle into a shotgun style mode. Now you're able to actually pull out the handle itself and as well as the bolt. And now you're left off with the actual trigger box itself and then the buffer. Now that we broke down the actual rifle to the lower side of itself, let's go ahead and continue off by talking about the lower parts such as the trigger box itself and the buffer and buffer spring. Now, say for example, you do have parts that are actually compatible for it that are also for repair, is replacing the trigger box such as using the companies such as Guns Modify, GNP, or even Iron Airsoft themselves. One thing our tech would recommend more is the actual GNP or the Guns Modify setup, due to the fact that they reinforce it with such as the Evo trigger box on the Guns Modify itself on the Z plate system. Now, why would you want to replace that? Well, mainly in the factors of, say for example, if you're like a guy like me that likes the more heavier recoil, you would change out your recoils with being a more metal system on the buffer and a stronger spring set. But that will wear down the plate on here, such as the Z plate on the actual right side of the receiver, that would lock the bolt itself. So we would highly recommend upgrading to those when you actually upgrade to a heavier system, such as a heavier bolt or a heavier buffer. Now, in regards to that though, is say for example you want to do the faster cycle rate, well then just go ahead and keep your actual stock spring and everything else, and as well to that the stock actual bolt or even the nozzle. You'll still have the fast cycle rate as you'll see on the actual gas blowback system on here, but as well to that, not as much recoil itself. To each its own on how you want to customize your actual gas blowback MWS system. Now for the parts on the upper. The actual bolt itself is a plethora of parts, for example, such as using either Guns Modify, Angry Gun, even Iron Airsoft themselves again. Now, it's not really necessary for the time being on the MWS to use the green gas, but the one thing we notice as well is that 9 times out of 10, you would actually have to change out the actual charging spring or return nozzle spring itself on the actual bolt itself for the nozzle. Keep the nozzle stock, as that is actually still pretty good on its compression and as well to that to be able to withstand using green gas. But again, the parts are a plethora out there for the MWS to be able to upgrade to whatever your needs necessary. In regards to your stock for your actual MWS, it uses a mil-spec buffer tube type. So if you want to change out your stock for such as like the Magpul styles or any other aftermarket stocks, as long as it's actually following the mil-spec buffer tube style, you should be good to go. Now to adjust it, you do have 6 positionals to basically adjust to whatever length you would need to follow the same arm length as you would to help support when aiming and using the gas blowback rifle itself. Now this is a part of the episode where we would adjust hop up and basically where to find it on the MWS system. Well, it's actually as easy. Say for example, if you do have long fingers as well, you'll be able to just lock back the bolt, hold it in, and now you'll be able to adjust the actual hop up dial inside the mag well itself. But if you do have short fingers like I do, then just basically break it down shotgun style itself. Take out your bolt and your charging handle. And now you'll be able to adjust the dial right underneath. Now with the hop up for the MWS, either for the Mark 18 or the M4A1 Salt Mod style, you're going to be left with the actual 605 brass inner barrel about the length about 260 millimeters. Now for the MWS on gas efficiency and even on its performance itself. What makes it a plus and what's making it worth the actual ideal setup for any gas blowback rifle owner is the fact that the gas efficiency is outstanding on its performance. At a point, there are a couple references that it states that this rifle even works in cold temperature areas or even in cold weather seasons. To see that be done with an actual gas blowback rifle is beyond belief and at the same time worth the actual rifle itself. I mean, for example, that the fact that it can outstand this as well is what makes this rifle worth as an actual training weapon itself. Now for magazines and compatibility, the MWS is very proprietary on its own gas magazine system itself. Now, There are also other upgrades and also companies that would make it, such as the T8 system by EMG using the Lancer style magazine, as well to that from Guns Modify using the PMAG styles, or even your standard STADNAGs, or heck, as for this one, the Type 89 style magazines will work just as fine for any other MWS M4 system out there. I'm using .20 gram BBs and Puff Dino green gas. Now for the M4A1 SOC mod. So, while we actually chrono both of these rifles, we notice on the consistency for the MWS being around the 310 to 320 feet per second. Now that is low for my outdoor field guys, but you can always upgrade the inner barrel to be a little bit longer to help compensate it to be around the 400 FPS limit, or using a high pressure valve inside the actual nozzle itself on these systems. It can be changed and help out to give you your more outdoor field type of range. So when you purchase an MWS, mainly the gas blowback rifles, it's going to come in this nice actual sleeve box of saying the model of the M4A1 or the Mark 18 CQBR or any other variants that you will get. Now, it does come standard with is your actual operation manual of basically how to adjust it, maintain, or any other situations you would need to do on your actual gas blowback rifle itself, as well to that as safety procedures of what and what not to do in regards of your actual safety wise, and also a nice little target practice as well. And alongside, you'll get your magazine and your rifle itself. My final thoughts on the Marui MWS gas blowback rifle system. For the attention to detail, and of course, like everything else, being the receiver being Cerakoted, and also just again the features that come out to it, I will give the credit of what it's due, and it becoming a really nice setup and gas blowback rifle, all the way from performance to even just the looks. Now, the only drawback I have in regards to this is mainly the price for these rifles. The MWS in the M4A1 is around the $620 price market range, and also for the Mark 18 being around the $750 during this time of recording. It is very steep, but in comparison to like the AEG high ends being around the same price as doing, you know, MOSFETs, gear sets, and all the way through, it almost balances out. But also, in regards to this does help out with being more realistic and for that training purposes that some people would like to have. But what do you guys think about it? How do you guys feel about these rifles as well, and gas blowbacks in your experience with it? Go ahead and drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe. And also, if you're looking for products like these, check out airsoftmaster.com. My name's Mike, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
This video is brought to you by Airsoft Master.